And then you're trusting that company to securely and privately manage that data, hand it back, and then get rid of it.
You feel if you don't start using, especially like you said before as well with the stakeholder pressure or top-down pressure, that you feel if I don't integrate it, I'm going to lose my job, or I'm going to be left behind, I'm not going to be viewed as a modern, up-to-date researcher that's moving with the time. Okay, so happy to invite our listeners back to part 2 of the first workshop series with Caleb Sponheim. So in the last part, we had a look at where AI is currently useful in our workflows, and it was really interesting to hear Caleb explaining how AI is maybe currently viewed as a threat, or even can be exciting for some people, but sometimes can be confusing to know how, when, and why to use it. So that was really an engaging conversation. So now we're moving on to part 2, which, if my memory serves me correctly, how to deal with the pressure to adopt AI. So an interesting topic.
Yeah, it's a I will again thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about this because it is this more than what AI can do feels to be top of mind for most people. That the pressure either top down from leadership or bottom up from kind of coworkers or just kind of social media or our communities is so intense and often feels imbalanced or misproportioned to what AI feels like it can actually do right now, and especially the drawbacks associated with AI, where especially like if you think about AI being integrated into organizations, right? Because look, AI is exciting, it's interesting, it can be fun, but in the context of UX practitioners, like we work for organizations and companies and corporations, and we need it to be useful. We don't need it to be fun. We need it to be useful, right? And so, excuse me. It's strange that kind of the value add for organizations is less clear, but the pressure to adopt it is very clear, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And so there's a couple of there's a couple of variables there that are important to understand, especially when as individual practitioners, we're trying to figure out how to react to all of this, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I would say that if you, as a practitioner, as a UX professional in your work, are experiencing top-down pressure, like pressure from your stakeholders, for example. So either it's, your PM or like some other leadership, or even it's just other people on your team, other stakeholders that are kind of pressuring you to adopt AI based on, if you listen to part 1 and you've started implementing some of those things, and if you've done the things that I'm going to talk about in part 3, you can say to these stakeholders, hey, I'm actually already integrating AI to the extent that it accelerates and improves my work.
Yeah.
And I'm not integrating AI where it's not ready yet to improve or enhance or accelerate my work. That I am making a very informed decision on where to include it and where not to. And hopefully, the stakeholder can respond positively to that type of message of, I thought you weren't using it at all, but oh, you actually are, and you're being very conscientious or intentional about where to include it in the work and justifying its use or not using it, lack of use in a particular context. So that requires, as professionals, that we get informed and educated and somewhat skilled up on using these AI tools. And I'll talk about in part three about some ways to do that. But that gives you a small set of frameworks to respond to stakeholder pressure. Now, if you're experiencing pressure to build AI tools or design AI features that integrate into a product, that's a very, very different conversation. And that's a completely different set of trade-offs rather than pressure to kind of adopt AI in the work that you do.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm mostly focusing on that latter case of, hey, you're experiencing pressure to do this. What can you do? What's weird, like, does that make sense, Dale? Like, what is there
Absolutely.
anything there that feels
No,
like you want clarity on?
no, absolutely not. I agree completely with all of that. And it is, I think with, we spoke about it in part one briefly. Sometimes as a UX researcher, you see all these AI everywhere you look on social media that you feel if you don't start using, especially like you said before as well with the stakeholder
Mm,
pressure or top-down pressure, that you feel if I don't integrate it, I'm going to lose my job or I'm going to be left behind. I'm not going to be viewed as a modern, up-to-date researcher that's moving with the times.
yeah.
So sometimes you may start using AI or start looking to use it, even when you don't feel comfortable using it in certain areas, or you start
Yeah.
experimenting a lot and you start to lose your way a little bit, and also you lose structure in your research process,
Hmm.
which obviously is good to obviously review your own processes as well. But sometimes with that pressure, then that's when you start to make errors or you overlook things or just to fit
Yeah.
in AI or some tool into your workflow. So yeah, no, I don't
Yeah.
know if that's what you were where you were looking to bring out, but yeah.
Yeah, I fully agree that that pressure can kind of lead us to ways of working that are not as efficient or productive or even enjoyable.
Yeah.
And look,
Exactly.
the systems and organizations in which we work are going to dictate how we work.
Of course.
And there may be situations where you're forced to use Microsoft Copilot every day and it's tracked and like you gotta do it. And even if it's
Mm,
reducing your productivity, you're
yeah.
required to integrate it. And at that point, like, hey,
Yeah.
I you got to do what you got to do.
Of
Uh,
course.
but there are a couple other things that I want to mention that can justify not using AI to stakeholders. So, especially in a research context, data privacy is incredibly important,
Oh yeah.
right? And when it comes to AI companies and AI
Mm,
tools, there's a spectrum of privacy that on which they operate. So the vast majority of AI tools, I would say, especially in an enterprise or organizational context,
mm,
fall into the cloud-based private category. So what
mm,
this means is in order to interact with an AI tool, you are uploading some information to the cloud, to servers uh, rented or owned by an AI company because these models live in the cloud. And so they need to receive the data,
yeah.
operate on it, and then deliver back. What
Mm,
that means is you're handing information, you're releasing ownership of that information over to another company for a period of time.
yes.
And then you're trusting that company to securely and privately manage that data, hand it back, and then get rid of it. Also, you are trusting that that company will not go on to use that information you provide it to train for its own means, right? To train models in the
Yeah.
future or something like that. Now, on an organizational level, if there's an AI tool integrated or you're using like a research tool that has AI integrated, oftentimes the company has made a decision to trust that AI organization or that
Mm,
AI product through some contract or agreement that, like, yes, we trust this company not to hold on to the data, share the data, or use the data to train their models, right?
mhm.
In an individual capacity, if you're receiving pressure to use AI in your research, and there aren't those agreements in place, you have a very strong basis on which to say there are significant data privacy issues present with doing qualitative analysis, quantitative analysis, or uploading participant data in any capacity to these services. And so you can say, look, like I can use AI to plan research, to write participant communication, to lots of other things, but to actually conduct the research in terms of analysis, the privacy framework is not
Yeah.
appropriate. So
Yeah.
that's another kind of line of communication that you want to make sure you're clear about when it comes to receiving pressure to adopt AI.
Yeah.
Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. 100%.
So that's another thing that we kind of need to consider. I think there may be another situation where you're experiencing pressure, and this might happen in smaller organizations where maybe you're experiencing pressure to help contribute to kind of an organization's AI strategy. Or like,
Okay.
oh, what is your team's strategy on AI adoption, right? Or what is our company's strategy on AI adoption? And my opinion is that most organizations should have an AI strategy, but it can be we're not using it right now,
Okay.
right? It needs to be, and just like on the individual capacity, it should be an informed thing of, hey, we're kind of keeping track of things, we're being aware of things, and at
Mm.
this moment in time, it's not right for our organization as
Sure.
a quartz mining company to adopt AI.
Yeah.
Right? Like, but, so we're choosing not to use it, but, maybe we're maintaining a working group that kind
Yeah.
of reviews advancements every 2 weeks or something like that.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
That can be enough, right? I still believe at this point, organizations, the vast majority of organizations don't need to be using AI.
No, yeah, that's true.
That's where I'm at where the
Yeah.
industry is right now, especially when it comes to how AI interacts with organizations in kind of a practical way, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
AI is anything but consistent right now. Organizations
Yeah.
thrive on consistency. AI
Yeah.
products don't scale well across organizations. Generally, a lot of these tools have problems with customer support, privacy and contracts, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
AI outputs are often wrong, right? Like if you ask an employee to, engage in like one task or another, um, like if you ask an AI to engage in one task or another, and two employees do the same thing with the same AI tool, they're going to get a different answer.
Yeah. And that's
Right?
why
And
it
so it's
doesn't
like,
really
wait,
scale well.
yeah, that's why
Because
it
if
doesn't scale well.
yeah, if
I
different employees or even people within the same team are getting different different outputs, and maybe if it is
Yeah.
like cross teams, and maybe teams aren't communicating well or just not communicating on that specific thing or whatever they're working on, then you can
Mhm.
have a misalignment or you can have a mismatch of results, and then that creates conflict, and then so yeah,
Oh, it spins out, right?
yeah,
Exactly. You can just kind of step it down the logic path and be like, oh yeah, no, this is going to solve more problems than it's
yeah,
solving. Um, and again, I need, in some ways, it's easier to make these decisions in an individual capacity as an individual practitioner of like, hey, how, I'm doing this work individually. How do I use AI to improve it? Once you involve more and more people, it creates multiplicative issues.
yeah,
And this is true of any tool, any piece of enterprise software, right?
yeah,
Like we don't need to throw out all of the other logic that
no,
we've built up about integrating tools or integrating software
yeah,
or anything into an organization. It's the same type of comparison and calculus.
yeah,
And, you know, the thing that we haven't talked about here is cost. There are lots of different costs associated with AI, but one of them just is money, right? And a lot of these AI tools are not cheap.
No.
I think Microsoft Copilot is going for like 20 or $30 per user per month.
Okay.
You, across an organization, across that
That
many
can add up.
seats, it's going to add up very quickly.
Yeah.
And, maybe it doesn't feel like that much money, but what are you getting for that money,
Yeah.
right? It is how much benefit are you able to drive? And I'm not just saying like, oh, it feels good to do this, or oh, it sped up this thing a little bit. But if you can tie AI adoption to some sort of KPI,
Yeah.
that you in an organizational context,
Yeah.
right? It can't just be exciting or fun. It needs to
No.
be useful.
Yeah, and also you'll get a discrepancy between how everyone uses it. So you'll have those that just integrate into everything they're doing. And then those they kind of almost forget that it's there. And we all have those tools that we buy or we start using them. We just, because it's exciting to use at the beginning and then you just get used to it, or you continue, you go back to your old methods. So then that's when there are KPIs, then they'll be able to see, okay, it's not really working, or the adoption doesn't need to be for everyone in the organization.
Yeah, fully agree. Now there are always variables other than productivity and efficiency that drive product adoption in an organization, right? Like if you are a consulting company whose clients are clamoring for AI expertise, you're gonna give all your employees ChatGPT or something, right? Like, and just so that you can kind of communicate on a kind of image or optics level that you have that competency in your organization, right? This is
course.
true of like stakeholder pressure to
Yeah.
adopt AI, right? Not just stakeholder rather, but like stockholder or shareholder pressure, right? Where
Yeah.
there are variables other than the fundamentals of what the company does that may drive this pressure in really
Yeah.
weird ways. And so as individual workers, there's only so much we can do to affect the systems under which we work, but ideally we can like communicate, hey, I'm actually already integrating AI, right? I'm actually already doing it. It's improving things in X, Y, and Z ways. There are still many core competencies that it's not touching at all, right? So the fundamental act of research, the fundamental act of creating new knowledge, that is not something that AI can do effectively right now. It can't do it.
Okay.
The act of communicating with and balancing stakeholder priorities in a design context, that AI can't do, right? There are many kind of the core activities of UX work can't be touched by AI right now. And so even though there are places where it can accelerate work and you can communicate to stakeholders that that's the case, there are many aspects of how we work that are for us and can only be done by us.
Yeah. Which is reassuring at this point in time.
At this point in time.
Yeah,
At
exactly.
this point in time. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and also just to touch on that as well. I don't know if you're going to touch on this later already in your outline, but do you think there ever will be a time where AI will start to creep into those kind of core, what's the word, like just processes, workflows, ways of working, etc., that are core to UX? And how do you think that will also maybe change the landscape? It's probably a loaded question, a big question, but
I like this question. I get this question a lot. And in general, Energy as an organization focuses on foundational advice and guidance that practitioners can use tomorrow, right? we tend to be kind of small c conservative in our recommendations because we want to be evidence backed, we want to be research backed, we want to make sure that what we're communicating is sound and relevant for people to use. As a result, in my own personal work, in my own personal teaching, we take the same approach with AI as we do with any other topic, which is we're not in the prediction game really that much. We focus on, and what I teach is things that are relevant right now, practical things about AI that you can apply right now, because it's not useful to tell a UX researcher, hey, in 3 to 5 years, this thing might happen. Isn't that worth the money that, you know, you're paying for this course? And it's like, no, it's not useful, right? Like, that's just going to give me more nightmares or something like that, right?
That's
So
true.
I don't tend to make many predictions.
Okay.
What I will say is when anyone says something is 3 to 5 years away, like, oh, we're 3 to 5 years away from, you know, doing amazing drug discovery or using AI, or we're 3 to 5 years away from having AI agents, you know, perform most job responsibilities or something like that. What that requires, often when they say like 3 to 5 years, is some sort of breakthrough,
Yeah.
right? It is not a linear kind of expected timeline to reach some sort of improvement. With something that far out, it often requires something fundamental to change or improve to
And they're
enable that
predicting.
capability. And they're predicting that it might happen in 3 to 5 years, but we can't say that it's going to happen in that time frame or that it ever will. So that's the framework that I kind of view a lot of these types of
this makes
predictions,
sense.
that something about how the technology works needs to fundamentally change in order for that prediction to become true. And people are just predicting that that fundamental change will happen. But I am not going to bet on those types of things occurring.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and yeah, I agree as well. I think it only, like, if something is not yet happening and there's no sign of it happening anytime soon, there's no point in filling your head, because you'll end up overthinking things and start trying to learn things or learn new tools with the expectation maybe. But there's no point. Like, it's better to focus on your work now and upskilling in the things you know now and how you're working now, and growing
And
that way. And then just
I
be
think
familiar and keep pace with it. But yeah,
I fully agree. I think there is a way to not be caught off guard, though, I think.
of
So,
course. Yeah.
and we'll cover this in the next part, actually, about how to keep up with the AI world, that there's a small amount of work that you can do so that you're not caught by surprise when something big happens. And so that you feel prepared to kind of take advantage of AI becoming relevant in a new sector or a new part of your work. So I guess look forward to that. We'll cover it in the next bit.
Absolutely.
But I hope this part has helped people understand how to navigate the pressure that they're experiencing to adopt AI. It's obviously very complex.
Yes.
Different personalities have a lot of different ways that pressure is expressed. So we definitely didn't solve all workplace problems in 20 minutes.
Of course. That would be great, but I don't think that will ever be possible.
I think I'd have to sell that if that's the case.
I think so. Yeah, you wouldn't be on this podcast, that's for sure. No, thank you. I'm looking forward to part 3, and I think it will be interesting. And it was a nice point that you mentioned at the end there, to not be caught off guard, because kind of tied in with this part, feeling the pressure that sometimes you don't know, like, how how deep to go into implementing these tools and this way of working. So there's that kind of making sure you find the right balance of not being caught off guard and making sure you've kept up with the pace and you're ready to start using it if it's something that can optimize your workflow and your output, etc. But also not getting too overloaded and drowning in it all now, that when that does arrive, you're already a mess and you've already got confused and yeah. So.
It's very easy to just subscribe to too many daily newsletters that are full of
Oh
slop.
yes, yeah.
That's what I'll say. That's my job. That's not any of your job.
That's actually a nice way to end part two.
Yeah.